Welcome to a special episode of Defend Your Faith. We're in the Christmas season now, and it's a season of shopping and decor and food and movies, but perhaps most notably, it's a season of music. And more, the old Christmas hymns have been replaced by the popular music written from mid-century, 20th century to the present. But did you know that Christians have been writing and performing songs celebrating the birth of Jesus at Christmas time since at least the 4th century AD? One of the first Christmas songs was Jesus, Light of All the Nations, written by Saint Hilary of Poitiers in the 300s. Probably the oldest song of any kind we still sing today is O Come, Emmanuel, which dates to the 8th century. Most of the Christmas songs we sing were written in one of several eras. The Reformation era, when songs such as Away in the Manger were written, the Great Awakening and Victorian eras, and that gave us songs such as Hark the Herald Angels Sing or O Holy Night, and the more modern Christian Christmas music that keeps coming out on Christian radio. Think of Mary Did You Know by Mark Lowry. Joining me to discuss the story behind the Christmas music we know today is Dirk Hartman. Dirk is an amateur hymnologist, a student of the history of Christian music. Dirk, I'd like to hear your thoughts about the story behind Christmas music. What's your favorite Christmas carol, and what's the unique story behind it?
Well, my favorite carol actually is What Child Is This? It's based on Greensleeves, as most people know, which was a song from the Middle Ages, and then new words were added. But the reason I like it is that it does tell us a lot of the sacrificial aspects of it. It's divided into two parts. The first part of the song itself, is about the birth. The second part is what's going to happen at the end of the life of Jesus. And the version I like is the older version, which has the words that are changing every verse. So every verse is unique instead of repeating a chorus or a refrain in that. And so that's the one that I like, because it talks about in the second verse, spears, nails shall pierce him through. The cross be borne for me, for you. And so that's talking about the end of the cycle of Jesus coming to as a baby, and then his sacrificial gift to us. Now, one of the things we have to remember about Christmas songs and where they come from and where we get them from is that it's tied to the calendar. Now, December 25th originally was on the old calendar. The Julian calendar was when we had the winter solstice. And so the Catholic Church appropriated that day to have it as the birth of Jesus, and it was a celebration of the return of the sun, or the coming of the sun, the rebirth of the sun. And so they tied that with the birth of Jesus, the Son of God coming to earth. And then when we got the Gregorian calendar, they made up for some of those errors, and so it pushed the day back from the winter solstice, which is on the 22nd, to the 25th. And that's where we have that. That was under Pope Gregory. Now, because Christmas and the winter solstice originally had been on the same day, there's a lot of traditions that we got that came from the pagan worship of the sun, returning of the sun, coming around those. And one of those big things is songs. Now, what happened would be that during they'd stay up until night and midnight to welcome in the new sun, the new era, and they'd gather around and they would sing songs and dance around fires and sacred stones or whatever, and this was called caroling. That's where we get that word from. It's from doing that kind of thing. And so that was something that was done for a long time, and as I said, the Catholic Church appropriated that into the worship of Christ and celebrating the birth of Christ. Now we have this tradition called caroling this time, and we do what? We go door to door knocking on it. That came during the Victorian era. That's really when that developed. Small groups, which are called waits, W-A-I-T-S, because of the waiting for the birth of the child, like the shepherds did. And that's what they called that. They called them waits, and then eventually that came into just going around and singing around on street corners and raising money for the local parishes. But then they started going door to door and got gifts of hot drink, because it was winter and it was cold, and hot food. So they'd have mince pies and wassail, and that's where we got the term wassailing from, as part of the singing of carols. Now, you talked about some of the old carols. Now, the oldest one we have any reference of is actually called the Angel's Hymn, and it was referenced by the Bishop of Rome, whose name is Telesphorus, and he referenced it in 129 AD. So that's the oldest reference we have to a Christmas song that was said to be sung at Christmas. However, we don't have any of the words. We have one line of the words and none of the tune and none of the rest of it, but we have the reference to the song. And of course, the fragment that we have is called Gloria in Excelsis Deo.
And at that time, they're celebrating Christmas on December 25th already.
At that point, I got to go back and check my notes here.
Yeah, no worries.
And I
know there's a lot of controversy
at that
about
time,
all these
at that
things,
time
too.
it was still on the 22nd. It wasn't until 1592 that it was moved to what we would call 4 days after the solstice, or 3 days after the solstice.
But it's always in that winter period.
It's always in the winter period, yes. And so it's always referenced as the cold and the return of the sun, or the birth of the sun, and that's why the reference is there. And so they have that. But two of the oldest carols that we have, you mentioned one of them, Jesus, Light of All the Nations, and then there's also Of the Father's Love Begotten. Those are two that we still have, that we still sing, and those are from the 4th century. So they've been around for hundreds of years. Now, the oldest printed carol, the one that we actually have a record of being printed, is called the Boar's Head Carol, and this was sung at Oxford during the winter period, because Oxford was founded as a Christian college, and they would go there and they would have this be sung at during the winter, during Christmas, at the feast, at their meals. They would sing the Boar's Head Carol. And that's the first one that we have that was printed, actually. But there's a lot of carols we have from the Middle Ages and from earlier. God Rest You Merry Gentlemen is one that we sing all the time. That's Middle Ages. Good Christian Men Rejoice. Actually, While Shepherds Watch Their Flocks by Night, that was one that kind of surprised me, because it's more of a modern style setting as far as the music goes. But those are all ones from the Middle Ages.
That's a long title for a song, too.
Yeah, it is. And if you read it, it's like 6 verses, but there are only 2 lines, but it's a long, long one. But it's a really good carol. I like that one. But most of the carols that we are familiar with today actually were written in the last 200 years, from the Victorian period and after the Renaissance coming in here. Silent Night was written in 1818. Hark the Herald Angels Sing in 1840. Good King Wenceslas, which sounds like something that would be written during the Middle Ages.
Yeah, people think that one's really, really old, like 1,000 years old in most cases.
1853.
Is what people think.
It's not even 200 years old yet. Well, over 200 years old. But it's kind of interesting that we have so much of that. And one of the reasons that we have that is because of the English Civil War. The English Civil War was 1642 to 1651. And it was won by the Puritans. Now, the Puritans didn't want Christmas carols or any celebration of Christmas because of its affiliation with the pagan worship of the return of the sun. And so they wanted to wipe out everything like that had any reference to that, and go solely with the concept of the birth of Christ. And so they wanted to get rid of caroling. They got rid of a lot of the carol songs. And so we lost a lot of the pre-Victorian or pre-Stuart songs during that time.
And that could explain why a lot of the earlier Christmas songs, they come not from an English background, but they'll often be from a French background.
From German background.
Even
some from Russia. That's why some of those were preserved that way. And you have the First Noel, which is an older song too. But then the Victorian era came along. And the Stuarts came in and restored everything, and the Victorian era came along, and that's when Christmas carols really took off. That's when they became really, really popular, because they had this thing that they invented called a Christmas card. And so in the Christmas cards, they would print lines or verses from Christmas carols.
Interesting.
And that's part of what they did, and that's part of why they became so widespread at that point in time. So there was those greeting cards did that. Well, then the people then would start their waits, their caroling, going around singing these songs that they learned from the Christmas cards. And they sang them in the churches, and they sang them in that. It became really popular, and so you have a lot of songs from the Victorian era is what we know as familiar as Christmas songs. So anyway, so hopefully that provided some insight into a little bit of history of what goes on with this, and hopefully I got some of that accurate.
Yeah, it was very fascinating information. It seems like Victorian times were kind of like the golden age of Christmas in a way.
It really was, because a lot of the traditions that we have that's when it was established. The Christmas tree, Christmas cards, the giving of gifts, exchange of gifts, the tradition of giving to the poor was very big at that time. And so all of these traditions come from that Victorian era. There's a lot of money coming in too, and so that helps support more of a lifestyle that they could do these kinds of things, invite people over for Christmas and sit around and sing carols.
A wealthier time.
Yeah. So.
And Christmas songs, when they're Christian Christmas songs, it's a great way of sharing our faith. And if someone's looking for the best Christmas song to communicate the gospel message, what would you say would be the best?
Pretty much any of them.
Yeah,
but the best one, I think one of the best ones communicating what Christ is about and what the day is about. Number one, joy to the world. There's some of these older Christmas songs from the medieval era, that are like Good Christian Men Rejoice, and they're all in minor keys,
Right.
So they're all down and
Very deep.
very deep and very, very minor feeling, kind of, well, woe was me kind of things in a lot of them.
Not
but
very
you get
joyous.
to Joy to the World, and Joy to the World is in a major key, and it is an upbeat song. It's joyous, and it explains what we need to know. Joy to the world, the Lord has come.
Right.
So that's a fascinating one. What Child Is This? As I mentioned before, one of my favorites, also is very good because it does talk about both sides of the coin on that, as it were, the birth of Christ, and then also his sacrifice for us, what's going to happen to him down the road. So those two I would recommend if you're going to share a Christmas carol with people. You can share that. Some of the more modern ones, we talked about that this morning when we were singing the Jamaican Christmas Carol, which I think came out in the 50s.
And I grew up with that song.
Not as historically accurate, and it's a very basic song, as it were,
Yeah.
but it's happy. It's a very happy song and fun to sing. So that's another one you can share with people just to open that crack in the door for them so that they can kind of understand the joy that we have about this season. That it's not about the presents. It's not about the Christmas lights being out on your thing. By the way, one of the things I always find fascinating is the tradition of the Christmas tree was started by Martin Luther.
I've heard that.
And they hauled in this tree from outside that was probably drying out, and they put candles on it. I'm going, that's a fire hazard waiting to happen. But
It totally is, yeah. But it was a different time, and it was a different climate, too.
It was
a lot
time,
more
yeah.
moist climate.
Yeah. And they didn't have the houses heated up to 70 degrees or 74.
Right.
It was really much cooler inside, so it didn't dry out as much. But but him bringing that inside to show the worship of God in that, and the evergreen concept of being God is always with us. So.
And I'm very impressed by the longevity of Christmas music because, popular music from even a couple hundred years ago, we probably wouldn't even understand it or be interested in it today. But the Christmas songs, it's very timeless. And it reminds me that the message of the coming of the Savior really is a message for all eternity. It will always be relevant.
Yeah, it's you talk about that. How many songs do we know from the jazz era?
Not many.
Not many. From the 20s, even from the late 1800s, we don't know a lot of songs from then.
Sidewalk
we know
of
songs.
New York is one of the few.
Yeah, but we know a few of them.
Yeah.
But think how many Christmas carols we know that are from the Victorian era, from the
Many
Middle
of them.
Ages. And even references that we have in songs to ones that are in the 400s and after that. So, and we're still singing these songs. We're still rejoicing in these songs. So it's amazing how much they stand up through history and through time.
So thank you so much for joining us for this special edition of Defend Your Faith. And thank you, Dirk, for your insights. You're a wealth of knowledge.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but thank you anyway. Blessings.
God bless.